Mr. Bryant, on count one, malice murder, I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole.
The last text Susana Morales sent to her mother was simple, yet it carried the weight of a promise she wouldn't keep. "I'm on my way home," she typed at 9:40 p.m. on that fateful summer night of July 26, 2022. The message, like countless others between mother and daughter, was supposed to signal the end of an ordinary evening in Norcross, Georgia. Instead, it marked the beginning of an agonizing mystery, a community's heartbreak, and a stark revelation about trust in those sworn to protect. As the clock ticked past the expected return time, Maria Brand's worry turned to dread. Susanna, a vibrant 16-year-old with dreams of becoming a detective, had left a friend's house at Sterling Glen Apartments, just a short walk from safety. Her text was the last sign of her journey. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Each minute stretched into eternity, the absence of Susanna more palpable with every passing second. That single message became the beacon of hope that later turned into a stark reminder of a night that changed everything, leading to a quest for truth that would challenge the very notion of trust. From Sterling Glen Apartments, where she had been hanging out with friends, Susanna embarked on what should have been a short walk to her home. Her phone's final signal pinged near Oak Lock Trace and Steve Reynolds Boulevard. When she didn't arrive, her family's concern grew into alarm. The next morning, they reported her missing, but the initial response was that she might have run away. The days that followed were filled with hope, fear, and increasingly desperate searches. The Morales family, particularly her mother Maria and sister Jasmine, felt the weight of the situation as if it were a physical burden. Each passing hour without word from Susanna stretched time into an endless loop of anxiety. They used the Life 360 app in an attempt to trace her last known movements. The app's data was one of the few lifelines they clung to in those early, uncertain days. The last ping of her phone near Oak Lock Trace was both a clue and a cruel reminder of how close she was to safety. The community rallied, organizing searches that combed through neighborhoods, parks, and the woods surrounding Norcross. Flyers with Susanna's smiling face were plastered on every available surface, her eyes hopeful in photographs that now held a haunting quality. Friends, neighbors, and strangers joined in, driven by the collective fear of what might happen if she wasn't found soon. However, the initial police response was lackluster, with some officers suggesting she might have left of her own accord. This assumption, based on her age and the lack of immediate signs of struggle, did little to alleviate the family's growing panic. Weeks passed with no substantial leads, turning hope into a fragile thread, easily broken by each passing day without news. The Morales family's repeated calls for action were met with what seemed like procedural indifference, highlighting a chasm between public expectation and the reality of missing persons investigations. The uncertainty of Susanna's fate became a dark cloud over the Morales household, a constant reminder of how quickly life can turn into a nightmare. The community's united front in the search for Susanna was a testament to her impact and the love she inspired, but with each day that passed, the hope of her safe return dimmed, leaving behind only the relentless pursuit of answers. As days turned into weeks, the lack of progress in the investigation added to the Morales family's distress. They used technology like Life 360 to trace Susanna's last movements, but there was little official action until February 2023. That month, human remains found in a wooded area were confirmed to be Susanna's, shifting the case from a missing person to a murder investigation. The discovery of Susanna's remains in a wooded area between Drowning Creek and Barrow County was a grim turning point. The Morales family, along with the entire community, had hoped against hope for her safe return, but this confirmation brought a new, chilling reality. The investigation now took on a different urgency, with law enforcement piecing together the last known moments of Susanna's life. The Morales family's use of Life 360 had already given them a rough outline of Susanna's route home, showing her phone's final ping before it either died or was turned off. This data, coupled with the location of her remains, began to paint a more sinister picture. The police, who had initially been criticized for their response, now faced the daunting task of backtracking through months of missed opportunities and public scrutiny. The investigation widened, focusing on who might have been in the area where Susanna was last seen and where her body was eventually found. This led them to Miles Bryant, a Doraville police officer living near the Morales family. On the day Susanna disappeared, Bryant had reported his gun stolen, an action that, in hindsight, seemed too coincidental to ignore. With the discovery of Susanna's remains, the investigation honed in on Bryant, leading to his arrest for concealing her death and filing a false report. The evidence against Bryant began to mount. His apartment was searched, revealing more about his character and activities around the time of Susanna's disappearance. The police found digital devices that later showed Bryant had searched for information on how long it takes for a body to decompose, the very day Susanna vanished. This, combined with his proximity to the crime scene and the timeline of events, painted a damning picture. The transition from a missing person case to a murder investigation also highlighted systemic issues within the response to missing persons from minority communities. The Morales family's anguish was compounded by the initial lack of urgency in the investigation, a reflection of broader societal issues regarding trust in law enforcement and the handling of such cases. As the investigation unfolded, the community watched with bated breath. The media coverage intensified, with each new piece of evidence or revelation bringing more attention to Susanna's story. The Morales family, while devastated, found some solace in the renewed efforts to find justice for Susanna. They advocated tirelessly, ensuring her case didn't fade into obscurity, pushing for an investigation that now had the momentum it deserved. The investigation into Susanna Morales's disappearance and murder thus became not just about finding who was responsible, but also about examining the procedures and prejudices that might have delayed justice. It was a painful journey for the Morales family, marked by the slow reveal of truths that would eventually lead to a courtroom, where the full extent of the tragedy would be laid bare. Miles Bryant, a Doraville police officer living near the Morales family, suddenly became central to the narrative when he reported his gun stolen on the very day Susanna disappeared. His arrest for concealing Susanna's death and filing a false report came swiftly after her body was found, with his service weapon discovered near her remains. This damning evidence led to further charges of felony murder and kidnapping against Bryant, who was immediately dismissed from his police duties. The day Susanna Morales went missing, Miles Bryant's report of a stolen gun appeared innocuous, a routine matter for a police officer. However, this act later served as a critical link in the chain of evidence against him. When Susanna's remains were discovered, investigators revisited Bryant's report with newfound scrutiny. The gun, which he claimed had been taken, was found near Susanna's body, suggesting a direct connection between Bryant and the crime scene. The arrest of Bryant was swift, a testament to the urgency now propelling the case forward. Charged initially with concealing Susanna's death and filing a false police report, these were just the tip of the iceberg. The discovery of his service weapon at the scene escalated the charges to include felony murder and kidnapping, transforming public perception of Bryant from a law enforcer to a suspect in one of the community's most heinous crimes. The news of Bryant's arrest sent shockwaves through both the Morales family and the community at large. For the Morales family, it was a moment of bitter realization. The person they might have trusted in the aftermath of Susanna's disappearance was potentially responsible for her death. The community, which had rallied around the search for Susanna, now grappled with the betrayal represented by one of their protectors turning into the perpetrator. Bryant was promptly removed from his position at the Doraville Police Department, his badge and uniform stripped away, symbolizing the severance of trust and duty. The legal system began to dissect his life, uncovering more details that painted a disturbing picture. His online activities, particularly his searches related to body decomposition, were brought to light, further cementing the case against him. As Bryant sat in custody, the Morales family faced a complex mix of emotions: relief that a suspect was in custody, anger at the betrayal by someone meant to serve and protect, and grief for their lost daughter. The arrest was a pivotal moment, not just in the pursuit of justice for Susanna, but also in highlighting the vulnerabilities within the system where those trusted with public safety could exploit their position. This case would now proceed to trial, where every piece of evidence, every action taken by Bryant, would be scrutinized under the harsh light of justice. His arrest was not just about apprehending a suspect, but also about restoring some measure of faith in a system shaken by one of its own. The trial in June 2024 was charged with emotion. Witnesses described Susanna as a bright, hopeful young woman with dreams of detective work. Evidence presented included Bryant's cell phone data, placing him at the crime scene, and his internet searches about body decomposition. The courtroom heard from a devastated Miles Bryant, Susanna's mother, whose testimony underscored the family's suffering. Despite the defense's efforts to sow doubt, the evidence was overwhelming. From the outset, the courtroom was a sea of tension, with the Morales family, friends, and community members filling the seats, each person a silent testament to the life of Susanna Morales. The prosecution laid out the narrative of that fateful night, painting Susanna not just as a victim but as a vibrant soul whose life was abruptly ended. They described her as an aspiring detective, a poignant irony given the circumstances of her death. Friends and teachers spoke of her ambition, her kindness, and her laughter, making her more than just a case file. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. The core of the prosecution's case was the digital footprint left by Miles Bryant. His cell phone records were presented, showing his phone had pinged near the location where Susanna's body was found at critical times around her disappearance. This data was more than circumstantial. It was a timeline that placed Bryant at the scene when he should have had no reason to be there. The prosecution methodically detailed how Bryant's phone had been active in areas that aligned with Susanna's last known movements, weaving a narrative of opportunity and deceit. Further damning was the evidence from Bryant's internet searches. On the very day Susanna vanished, Bryant had searched for information on how long it takes for a body to decompose. This, alongside his claim of a stolen gun that was later found near Susanna's remains, was presented as not just coincidence but premeditation. Each piece of evidence was laid before the jury like pieces of a puzzle, with the prosecution methodically connecting the dots to form a picture of guilt. Miles Bryant's testimony was perhaps one of the most emotional moments in the trial. Through tears, she spoke of the nightmare of losing her daughter, the endless nights of waiting, and the shattering of trust when they learned of Bryant's involvement. Her words painted a vivid picture of a family torn apart by grief, yet bound together in their quest for justice. Her testimony was not just about loss. It was a call to action, a plea for the jury to see Susanna as more than evidence, but as a life cherished and missed. The defense, aware of the mounting evidence against Bryant, attempted to introduce reasonable doubt. They questioned the reliability of cell phone data, suggesting it could be misinterpreted or manipulated. They argued that Bryant's internet searches could be explained by curiosity or unrelated research. They portrayed Bryant as a man whose life was under unfair scrutiny, his actions misconstrued due to his profession. However, the defense's arguments seemed to falter under the weight of the prosecution's case. Witnesses for the defense included colleagues who spoke of Bryant's character, But these testimonies did little to counter the hard evidence. The prosecution rebutted by emphasizing Bryant's own actions post-disappearance, like his false report of the stolen gun, which served as a red flag rather than an alibi. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a battleground of facts versus doubt. The meticulous presentation of evidence, from the physical to the digital, left little room for alternative theories. The jury, after days of testimony and evidence, was left to deliberate on what had become a clear narrative. Bryant's involvement in Susanna's death was not just probable but evident. The closing arguments brought the case full circle, with the prosecution reminding the jury of the human element at the heart of this tragedy: Susanna's dreams, her potential, and the void left by her absence. They underscored the betrayal of trust by someone sworn to protect, urging the jury to deliver justice not just for Susanna but for the community's faith in the system. The trial of Miles Bryant was not merely about proving guilt. It was a reflection on responsibility, the sanctity of life, and the consequences of betraying the public's trust. The evidence presented was overwhelming, leading to a conviction that resonated far beyond the courtroom, a somber reminder of the complexities and vulnerabilities within society's guardians. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts, sentencing Bryant to life without parole. The family's impact statements painted a picture of a life cut short and a community forever altered. Bryant's apology was met with silence, the weight of his actions echoing in the courtroom. As the verdict was read, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The unanimous decision by the jury on charges of malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, and false report of a crime was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow from the Morales family. The sentence of life without parole was not just a legal conclusion but a statement on the gravity of Bryant's betrayal of trust and duty. The impact statements from the Morales family were heart-wrenching. When Bryant was given the chance to speak, his apology felt hollow against the backdrop of the family's pain. His words, meant perhaps to seek some form of redemption or acknowledgement, were met with a silence that spoke volumes. The courtroom, filled with those who knew Susanna's warmth, could not reconcile the officer they once might have trusted with a man now convicted of such heinous acts. The aftermath of the trial left the community grappling with the implications of the case. It sparked conversations about police accountability, the treatment of missing persons cases, especially within minority communities, and the trust placed in those who are sworn to protect. For the Morales family, while the verdict brought a semblance of closure, it could never replace what was taken from them. Bryant's conviction was more than the end of a legal process. It was a somber mark in the history of Norcross, a cautionary tale about the shadows where trust can be lost, and a call for vigilance and reform in the systems that govern public safety. The case of Susana Morales not only brought justice but also sparked conversations about community safety, the oversight of law enforcement, and the treatment of cases involving minority victims. The Morales family, though finding some measure of justice, continued to live with the void left by Susanna. Her story, beginning with a simple text message, ended as a cautionary tale about the shadows in which trust can be lost. In the quiet moments after the trial, the Morales home was a place of reflection and remembrance. Photographs of Susanna adorned the walls, her smile a constant reminder of what was lost. The family, while relieved at the verdict, knew that justice was a small comfort in the vast ocean of their grief. They turned their sorrow into advocacy, pushing for changes in how missing persons cases are handled, especially those from communities often overlooked by the system. The community, too, was changed. Vigils for Susanna became a platform for discussing broader issues of safety, trust, and the role of law enforcement. Susanna's story became a reminder of the responsibilities that come with wearing a badge and the need for transparency and accountability within the force. Her legacy lived on in the activism it inspired, the reforms it pushed forward, and the conversations it sparked about the very nature of trust within society. While the legal system had its say, the true impact of Susanna's life and death would be measured in the hearts of those she touched and in the changes made to ensure no other family would endure such a nightmare. Her story, ending with a courtroom verdict, began anew each time someone spoke her name, advocating for a safer, more just world. Subscribe for more gripping true crime stories that uncover the truth behind the headlines. Join us as we delve into mysteries, seek justice, and explore the human stories at the heart of every case.